What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're going to be looking at my race in the BMW M8 GTE car on Catalunya. This was the final race of this season, and we're now in the off season, which gives me a little bit more time to make this video. I was originally planning on the next video in my series being on throttle control, but then I won a race, so we're going to be looking at this one instead. Now, as we enter the last section of the rolling start, pay attention to the car on my left. That's Daniel. He's very important to this next little part. As you can see, Daniel wants to be ahead of me, but I'm the leader, which means I get to set the pace when the green light goes. I don't have to go immediately, but he's not allowed to be ahead of me before the checkered line. Now, as we approach the starting line, the green flag goes and Daniel takes off, ahead of me. As you can see, we hit the checkered line and he immediately gets on the brake, as he probably got a black flag penalty for being ahead of me at the start of the race. He drops back, and I managed to take the lead. Not that it was difficult. I happily take the lead. The next little bit, we don't really see Daniel. In fact, we don't see Daniel again for the rest of the race. I finished my first lap, and I realized that he wasn't behind me anymore, there was somebody else, and I managed to open the gap to about 5 seconds. We're going to take a closer look to what happened at the beginning of the race that caused all the other racers to be so far behind me, but we'll do that at the end of the video. There's not a whole lot that happens in this race. After I left the pack behind, nobody really caught up. So the rest of the race is relatively boring. So I'll probably skip through a little bit of it. If you guys want to see the entire race without my voice over top of it, let me know in the comments and I'll shoot you the replay file. Now, I want to talk about practice. I did what was probably close to 100 laps on this track, in this car, with nobody else on the track. Just me, getting to know the corners, all the different lines, pretending my ghost was a person and driving around him as though there was somebody else on the track. And this is the first time that I've actually done this for a race. And I was really happy when it paid off, but I didn't think it was going to pay off. When I jumped into private practice lobbies, the people in there are setting times of about 1:42. My qualifying time was a 1:44.0. So you can see why I didn't think I was going to qualify at the front. But because of my iRating, it's taken a dive because of recent races that I've done. I was in a lobby full of people who were of relative skill level, and I managed to qualify in front of them. One thing that I've realized about iRacing is that it emphasizes practice. The races mean something in iRacing, your iRating and your safety rating, and if you don't have enough practice under your belt, both of those things are going to plummet. I often find myself joining races on tracks that I recognize, but cars that I've never driven before, thinking, I'll be fine, I know these tracks, I know these corners. But as soon as you swap up the car, things get a little bit dicey. You start going off the track, running people off the road, or just being very slow and getting run into by aggressive drivers behind you. So practice is important. I have every intention of creating a video on the mindset that it takes to get into sim racing that's different from regular arcade racers, but that'll come later on after I'm finished all of the basic driving techniques. Another thing I noticed when I was recording the footage for this video is that watching yourself back is also very important and can help you become faster. When you're in the car, driving as best as you can, you feel like you're being a little bit more consistent than you actually are. But then going back and looking at your laps, you realize that you're not as consistent as you thought. You're missing apexes, causing a little bit of wheel spin, not braking properly. I personally look at my braking curves, which I haven't been able to include in the video because I haven't been able to set up any third-party software to record iRacing telemetry yet. That's coming, work in progress. I noticed that my braking curves are a little bit dodgy. They're a little bit aggressive. I'm going to do a video on how to brake properly, but I'm probably not the best teacher for that, honestly, if you were to see my braking curves. Let's take a very close look at this next lap. We can use this as kind of a track tour for Catalunya, so if we ever end up racing Catalunya together, I expect you'll be ready. We come down the first straight, we cross the line. We're going to pass all these grid lines here, and we're going to see the first turn. We're actually going to move onto the curb as much as we can without getting a penalty here and brake at the light. There's a red light. You're going to brake down, go down to second gear, hit that little orange sausage, which we hit a little bit more aggressively than I would have liked. It kind of unsettled the car. Staying to the left and then moving to the apex of this corner and then flooring it and going all the way back to the outside. We want to use as much of the curb here again as possible, braking hard and going down to second gear again. Going a little bit wide on here, just touching the apex, taking a little bit of a later apex than I normally would, into the middle of the track and over to the right. Slamming on the brakes, taking a late apex around the hairpin, and then flooring it into the dogleg. You want to cut this just a little bit, but you also want to be straight by the time you get here, so that you can hit this apex here, which I missed by just a little bit. Narrowly avoiding that yellow curb, we hit the turn before the straight, where we want to get on the throttle right after that yellow sausage. Use as much as the curb as we can and floor it down the straight here. There's a black sign on the right where we start to brake, all the way down to first gear, taking a late apex around that hairpin, which I actually didn't do too well around. We missed that apex quite badly. Should be taking a late apex here, but I got on the power a little bit too early and I end up in the sand, which doesn't give me enough speed down this straight. And then I managed to get around that okay, I suppose. Doing okay through the chicane, hitting both the apexes and getting hard on the power so that I can go full tilt around this corner and up to the finish line. So as you can probably gather, even after hours of practice, I'm still not a Catalunya machine. My laps are still relatively inconsistent, and I don't think I was able to post a 144 even for the entire race. I was lucky to get that in qualifying. Proud, but lucky. Keep in mind, however, that your lap times don't always matter during your race. It's your consistency that matters more so. If you're more consistent than the guy in front of you, the guy in front of you may go off track, which would let you pass him, even though he might be a little bit faster. Keeping him behind you might be difficult if he doesn't make any mistakes, but usually in short races like these, people are a little bit more aggressive. They want to get as many places as they can before the race is over. So they push as hard as they can, and they're aggressive drivers and end up running themselves and other people off the track and give you free positions. The moral of the story is to be patient. When you get behind somebody, just follow them for a little while. Normally you've got time, and they'll probably screw up, and then you won't have to fight them for position. It saves you trying to get by them on a corner, or aggressively shoving them out of the way and ruining both of your races. The rest of this race is basically a practice session, which is mostly what you've been seeing so far. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a quick jump to the last lap. As we come down the front straight and start our last lap, I check the relative and I realize that the person behind me is about 5.6 seconds behind. That's a pretty sizable gap. So I decide I'm probably going to take it easy for this lap and try not to screw up. But obviously, I catch a case of the last lap jitters and I throw my consistency entirely out the window. We do okay on this first turn here. And as we head down this straight into the corner, we go hard on the brakes. We turn in. Completely missing the apex, we go very wide around this corner. Into the straight before the hairpin. We are going to find the brake pedal here. And we're going to go wide around this corner as well, completely missing the apex again. As we accelerate into the dogleg, I think I really got to pull it together, but I'm still going too easy on the brakes. I missed my braking point entirely here and end up on the right side in the sand, almost getting myself caught on that yellow curb in the middle, which would have unsettled the cars quite severely. We do okay through here, hitting our regular throttle point, getting onto the curb on the left and accelerating down here. We hit our braking point okay. We start slowing down to go into the hairpin, and we end up going completely wide around the hairpin as well, completely missing the apex and almost mounting the curl on the right side. We turn into this right-hander, again going very wide, staying close to the middle of the track, hitting the apex a lot later than we would expect, braking hard and going into the final chicane, going a little bit wide, and we end up missing our braking point here and going directly into the chicane, giving us a very bad angle on the way out. By the time this lap was over, the gap to me and the person in second place was about 4.3 seconds, so you can see how the lack of consistency made it very easy for them to catch up. If I was like that for the entire race, there's no way that I would have won it. As I cross the finish line, I do your typical celebration serpentine as I come to grips with the fact that I just won the race. And I go through my slow down lap. We're going to take a look at Daniel's first lap now because we want to find out what happened to him because I didn't see him again for the rest of the race, despite the fact that his pace was very similar to mine. Hey Daniel, how's it going? This is Daniel's pace lap. Now, when I came back and watched this on my own, I did realize that his driving style was a little bit aggressive. I already pointed out that he wanted to be ahead of me on the rolling start, which doesn't really help him at all. Now remember, I am the first grid line, which means I get the ball when the pace car goes off. So after this next chicane, the pace car is going to go into the pits, and I'm supposed to have control as to when the race starts. It either starts when I go on the green flag, or when we cross the finish line. Daniel decides to speed ahead of me and take first place before we've even gotten the green flag, and then he slows down. You can see there's me on the right hand. And as the green flag goes, he hits the grass for some reason, probably looking for me, and then speeds off and immediately gets on the brakes. I'm assuming he got a black flag for getting ahead of me before the race started. He slows down, lets me go past, probably thinking that this was going to lift his penalty, which it doesn't. We're going to fast forward through his first lap and see what happens at the end of it. When I watched Daniel's replay back, I could kind of understand that he was a little bit frustrated. The way that he's driving, the apexes that he's missing, and the lines that he's taking don't exactly line up with a driver who's calm. Completely missing the last two apexes, goes into the dogleg a little bit tight, but hits the apexes okay. Goes into this straight here, and is probably paying more attention to his gap to me than anything else, as he completely misses his braking point and goes straight to the far side of the turn. This is the kind of thing that's going to cost you precious seconds, and that's why I keep saying that being calm is more important than racing fast. We're going to see him peel off into the pit lane, where the race is going to come to a grim end, as he forgets to disable his refuel and tire change, and sits there for the amount of time it takes the pit crew to do all of those things, plus a 30-second black flag penalty. Needless to say, this is pretty much the end of Daniel, and I didn't see him again for the rest of the race, except when I passed him in the pits on the following lap. But Daniel wasn't the only interesting thing that happened in this race. Daniel's little mistake did cost him a lot of time, but he did manage to finish the race. He didn't finish well, but he still finished. Here's a bird's eye view of the rolling start. It's messy, as usual. We can expect that from these low-level lobbies. People have never seen a rolling start in their life. Most arcade racing games start with grid starts. Grid starts are a little bit more fun. Rolling starts are usually a little bit safer. Pay attention to somewhere around the middle of the track. I picked somebody to spectate who saw the whole incident, so you guys should have a good idea of what actually happened. As we come around the trees, we can see the pace car has entered the pits and everybody starts to line up nice again. We approach the finish line and we'll see Daniel go onto the grass, and you'll see somebody shoot up the middle and cause a huge accident. And the accident just keeps getting bigger. All of these racers have just had their race ruined by one person. So I decided I wanted to take a closer look. This is Michael. Michael ruins races. Don't be like Michael. This low IQ race car driver can usually be found in his natural habitat of Forza Motorsport 7 or Forza Horizon 4, but he did make his way into this race somehow. Now, Michael decides that the rolling start is not good enough for him, and he decides he's going to make up a couple of places, not expecting the car on his left to pull out, and then he ping-pongs on the car on the right, goes into the wall, comes back, and wrecks another car, and that wreck just keeps getting bigger and bigger, as I said before. In closing, I just want to say again, don't be like Michael. There's no reason why he had to shoot up the middle of those cars, and that's not the point of a rolling start. The point of a rolling start is so that everybody starts the race safely. There's no point being that aggressive at the beginning of the race and ruining a bunch of other people's races. It doesn't make you any friends, and it certainly doesn't get you any I rating. Being calm, cool, and collected will almost always exhibit a net positive result, as opposed to being aggressive, where you end up like Michael and not only wrecking yourself, but wrecking a whole bunch of other people along with it. And with that mini rant out of the way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.